right. Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Flying Cat Marketing Interview Series. And today I'm really excited because I have Andrew Davies, who is CMO at Paddle. And we're talking about what it's like to be the first year is like as a CMO at a 1.4 billion valuated SaaS company. How's it going, Andrew?
Hey, thanks for having me on. Yes, it's going well, thank you.
Yeah, we were just chatting about this intense period of conference season. Uh, there was SaaStr and then SaaStr again, and then SaaStock. What else have you been participating in?
That was my three. I know you hustled a web summit too, but three and I was done.
Yeah, you guys had so many. You had like two stands at SaaStock, two booths, or big giant ones, and at least like five talks, right?
We hustle events hard, and someone asked me if we were going to be sponsoring 3 or 4 next year. It was very much a factor of the acquisition we did, where ProfitWell had already sponsored a booth and we had already sponsored a booth, rather than a strategy to kind of take over SaaStock or SaaStr booth by booth. We might go back to one booth next year. We'll see.
You kind of did take over them. It was like, oh, look, there's Paddle, oh, ProfitWell, Paddle, ProfitWell. Like every time I turned around, there was one of you guys on stage.
It's what you got to do.
It is what you got to do. You were really now you had the talk of LinkedIn after, especially that churn talk by Patrick.
Patrick knows how to grab the headlines. He's very good at that.
Did you guys plan that in advance? I mean, obviously you did, but what was the internal chat about that?
Oh, yeah, there was a little bit of conversation as to whether we thought it would be good or not. And, those things are mostly Patrick coming up with them. Like he's superb at, not just finding that insight into kind of growth and churn and retention from the data set we've got at ProfitWell Metrics, but also in finding super creative ways and attention grabbing ways of communicating it. And one thing that was really interesting about that talk, so for those who didn't hear it, I think it was 15, 20 minutes of talk, and Patrick only said one word, churn, the entire talk, whilst showing some really data-rich slides. And this was kind of a bit of an unintended consequence. Because he was only saying churn, no one could look at their phones. Everybody had to be looking at the slides the whole time. No one could check out, because otherwise they get zero value at all. And so the room, there were a few people that left, I think, at the beginning, thinking, what on earth is going on? But then everyone that stayed there stayed all the way through, and also had their phones out, taking photos of the slides and engaging in the content that was there, because it was only coming via one channel, via their visual channel. So yeah, super interesting as an experiment, and yeah, Patrick great at coming up with those.
There was so many people talking about it after, I mean, even at the after party and then on LinkedIn. So awesome. So let's talk about marketing at Paddle. I mean, the last year, I think it was still the last year, you guys acquired ProfitWell. Lots of stuff have been going on. You've been with Paddle now for a year, I believe. Where were they in their marketing journey when you joined, and what challenges have you faced so far?
So Paddle as a business had grown extremely rapidly. Fantastic business, fantastic unit economics, fantastic ambition. And all of those things were things that drew me to this business when I came on board. But it had grown very fast from quite a simple tactic mix. Now that's a virtue, that's not a problem. But in marketing's a series. B2B marketing is a series of ceilings. You have to find the next ceiling and explore the next ceiling before your current one runs out. Paddle had grown very fast pre-COVID and through COVID, riding on the software kind of infrastructure investments that many companies were making. And had really got to a point in time where they wanted to now get ready and retool the next phase of growth. My diagnosis looking in on the business before I joined was that we needed to build a much broader tactic mix supported by a broader team, rather than just relying on very customized, creative outbound messages through the BDRs and some event spend, which had served them really well up until that point. So yeah, it was really looking at a business that was in great shape, growing really fast, but needed a much broader bench of tactics and people to help them go to the next level, which is a hard message, because what you're saying is this is going to become less efficient for a time, but we need that to break through the next couple of ceilings. And then, obviously pretty quickly when I joined, we then pursued ProfitWell as an acquisition, and then that became a dominating factor of my first couple of quarters as well.
So that's actually an interesting point when you acquire another company that they have a whole marketing strategy, they have a whole way of acquiring their customers, and then
Mhm.
the parent company has their own way. What did you decide to do in terms of merging the marketing channels or merging the two different marketing from the two different companies?
Yeah, so I've been involved in a bunch of acquisitions over the last couple of years. Sell side, my business once, and then buy side, I think 4 or 5 times. And when I was leading brand digital and demand at Optimizely, and this was different to several of those acquisitions because we were buying a business that was really on the front foot, and we were buying it for strategic reasons, and they had a plan ahead of them that they weren't looking to exit. So that makes it, there's loads of positives to that, but it also makes it a bit difficult because it's not about them just operating under the cookie cutter model that you've built as the acquiring entity, because that's kind of not the purpose of the acquisition. So ProfitWell, you'll know them well. Many people listening to this will know them well. Patrick and the team had betted hard on a media strategy early on. So they were spending a lot of marketing dollars on creating really interesting shows, content, community events, and that got them to the point where we wanted to acquire them, right? It was a fantastic outcome, fantastic process. And so we wanted to buy in some of that thinking and methodology and the team that were doing that. And then on the paddle side, we had, probably it would be fair to say, a bit more scaled and robust kind of demand gen engine. Still very much, lots of problems, lots of things we're fixing in flight, as you always do as you scale. And so there are several bits of their engine that we very much wanted to keep. And then several bits that we wanted to combine the best of both. So yeah, we can talk about any of those in detail if you want, but it was an interesting process of really making sure we listened and understood from both sides for a good kind of 2-3 months, understood the people, the processes, how they did things. And now we're very much, 6 months in, we're now very much in making sure that all the teams are fully integrated and we're adopting single processes and stacks across the different functions.
So when you first joined, and I do want to dive into in a bit, like when you're analyzing the situation, what you decided to double down on, what you decided to merge, maybe what you decided to get rid of, because it's not just the acquisition, but also because you're joining as a new CMO. So regardless of whether there was
Mhm.
an acquisition or not, you're going to be making these kind of changes. So what were the first, like when you join and analyze the marketing situation, what are the first levers that you pull on, the first kind of things that you look at?
So let's start off with people. I think one of the attractions of joining Paddle was that I saw some great people at the business, a lot of great people at the business, including in the marketing function. And a lot of those people were super smart, and many of them had been on the journey with Paddle for a few years and perhaps hadn't seen larger companies in their career previously. So they were getting to the point where kind of it was the largest company they'd been at, or the company they'd been at longest. And so super motivated, hustlers, hard workers, smart, eager to grow, but perhaps hadn't seen a playbook that was at the next level. Now you've got to reinvent those for your business anyway. So it's not like you just take one and bring it in and everything's fixed. So on the people side of things, it was really wanting to make sure that I didn't come in and hire from my own network leaders that kind of sat above the team that was already here. Because I really genuinely deeply respected the people who were in the business and still are in the business. And so, yeah, first was on the team side of things, making sure I understood their roles, understood their skills, understood their capacity, their ambitions. And so I wasn't just immediately sitting a hire on top of them. And so that was the first piece. And then it was about making sure that alongside that, we did then bring in some extra experience and some other people, and also resource some of those, team leads that were already in the business with more people than they'd had previously, to be able to go to the next level. So that was a few thoughts on the people side. On the tech side and the channel mix, there was definitely a bunch of investments we immediately started to make to broaden that. So we started talking to analysts, started doing a bit more on the PR side. Bianca, who was in the business when I joined, has done a great job on that side. In the demand gen function, in the BDR team, Lily and many others who were there when I came in have done a great job of just adding extra tactics into the BDR teams, like direct mail and outbound dialing and other things they weren't really doing before. And then, in the demand team, upping the ad budgets and making sure we had a kind of a clearer kind of strategy around bottom of funnel and middle of funnel. So yeah, a whole bunch of those things. We really wasn't about removing anything they were already doing. It was really about adding to it and giving
Mhm.
the existing team some more resource to do that, and then bringing in some specialists and a couple of other roles.
Gotcha. How many different departments do you have in marketing right now, or when you started?
Yeah, so there was also a couple of shifts that happened as I joined that changed things. So when I joined, the marketing function was really small, but it also didn't include product marketing or the BDR teams. And as I joined, I didn't ask for either of those functions, but they came in as part of marketing. And so, I see the marketing function we're building really in three main parts. We've got the product marketing team in the middle, which is product marketing, customer marketing, and the actual web product, the .com. Around that, then we've got demand gen, which includes the BDR teams. And so that's about moving at scale all of our different audiences closer to our value proposition over time in a repeatable way. And then around that, we've got our brand and creative team, which is all about making sure we've got great reputation and reach and engagement from the wider market. And then I have an individual contributor, and I see Tarshan, who reports to me directly, who's sequencing kind of our go-to-market strategy alongside sales and product, who works with all three of those teams. So those are the three kind of kernels inside the marketing function.
Okay. So, just out of curiosity, because we are obviously an SEO agency, where does SEO and content fall in those departments?
Yeah, great question. So Danny Mansfield, who was here before I joined, is fantastic on the technical side of content, and she sits in our PMM team, in kind of a web subdivision of our PMM team. So yeah, right in the center. So
Right in product.
organic search sits with her. And then also, we're looking at how we invest in other, search like on YouTube, for example, which would probably sit within our brand and creative team.
Okay. I mean, that's a lot of different silos, and somehow it seemed like the BDR team is interesting that that sits under marketing, rather than sales, for example, because, oftentimes it sits under sales. Was that your doing, or is that how it was already?
So it wasn't, but it kind of happened as I joined. That was something that the business was already kind of choosing a decision that the business was already making at that point. Again, it wasn't something I asked for, but previously in the business that I've worked in, that has been how I've organized things. I think it sits perfectly fair in both places. I think it's largely depending on the capacity and the experience of the leader in sales and marketing as to where it can sit best and who's going to enable those people to hit their target and scale. I love having BDR or SDR within marketing, because what it does for the whole marketing function is sharpen the outputs from a demand gen side of things. It says that across this entire organization, we might be doing super cool things around, producing great content and shows and podcasts and, having a great website. But a key metric we're all judged on is how many opportunities we're creating. And that sits within the BDR function. So having that in marketing, I think, really sharpens the focus towards, immediate demand generation across the marketing team.
I mean, it really ties. I think it's a really good idea to have them report to marketing, because then they report back to marketing how good the leads are, uh, and then when you actually get to sales, sales becomes much happier because you still the BDRs obviously have to talk a lot to sales.
Yeah, wholeheartedly, and they are actually spending most of their time with sales, right? They're partnering with their AE, and they're being supported by sales enablement as well as by their BDR management. And they shouldn't have that. This shouldn't change their career path, right? Many SDRs or BDRs want to become an account exec, and so a lot of them, their promotion pathway is into sales, not necessarily, because we do want to make sure there's pathways into field marketing and into go-to-market strategy and other areas too. But yes, you're totally right. I think there's loads of insight that comes back in via the BDRs. And it's incumbent on other teams, content, etc., within marketing to make sure we're giving them the very best bullets to fire in their guns, so that they're actually, reaching, marking, targeting the right people with the right message.
Love that. So let's talk about the things that you doubled down on or merged, or got rid of, if there was anything. Let's start with doubling down. What did you identify was working well to the point that you wanted to double down on?
So Paula, who runs our demand team in London, and she managed our ad spend, and very quickly with her was able to identify that we just hadn't hit the ceiling on some of our, particularly our pay-per-click spend, and that was returning into not just but dollars of revenue transacted from our clients in a pretty short order. So we instantly kind of ramped up those budgets to try and find that ceiling, and increased a bit of budget for paid social too. Now that was from a low base. And she's fantastic. And it was just about trying to make sure that she knew she had my confidence to go and do that. So that was one thing we did double down on. We doubled down on some of the PR investments as well. So not just through a PR agency, but in the content we're creating and the outreaches to podcasters and influencers, etc., to make sure that we are building a wider brand. There was another big thing, which was there was a kind of a massive rebrand that had been underway for 9-10 months before I joined, but nothing had come live. Working with a big creative shop over in California, a lot of the work had been done, but that just needed some steering and some landing into the organization. So that included all of our touch points, including our website being rebranded, new color scheme, new kind of visual language, new messaging. And so one of my first jobs was jumping in and not necessarily doing much with that other than sharpening a few things and helping the team land a project that had been on their backs for a good couple of quarters. So that was something that was a bit of making sure was on the top of my priority list. So those are a couple of things that were key focuses. And then I think I love being in marketing, so that blend of art and science, right? And the science piece of it, the engine, the demand gen engine, we just weren't hitting our BDR quotas. And so we needed to do a lot of work there on how do we give them better messages, how do we make sure there's the right activity levels, how do we prove that by going after perhaps a more structured and measured and transparent approach, it's going to return them better quota attainment for their benefit as well as the company's benefit. So that was another key bit of focus.
Well, how do you know whether you've hit a ceiling or not?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And, I think these things are often something you feel as much as something you see. But what I mean by that is if we take a few different channels, so if we take field marketing as an example, there's a point in time where what you can offer has simply saturated the market. And in any given city or for any given webinar topic, you have started to reach all of the people who care or are in the location to engage with that format. And so it's about getting to the point where you're seeing the same faces over and over again, or you're seeing a decline of attendance rates in those channels. When it comes to ad spend, it's about making sure that you're not spending more and more, but seeing the same outcome. Therefore, things are getting more, less efficient. So people are perhaps seeing more impressions or clicking on more things, but actually not converting. So it's about conversion rates as well there. And it's the same on some of these other channels as well. For example, analyst relations. We're really early on our journey with analysts. Paddle had not really done anything before I came in. We're now working with G2 on the peer side, and we're chatting to some of the major analyst firms about working with them. And I've been through that journey previously on other companies. And that's a great channel to open up as an influence strategy, as a coverage strategy into your target accounts. But again, it hits a ceiling when the people who will be influenced by a Forrester or a Gartner have now heard about you, and you've got to open up new channels again. So yeah, all about efficiency and conversion rates.
And in terms of PR, for example, you said you doubled down on that. Was that more finding different channels to publish on? I know you said that you also doubled down on like the content quality. But what did that look like to increase PR? More channels, not channels, but like publications?
Yeah, so I think about it more broadly than just what we'd be doing through solely earned channels. So, for example, we sponsored a couple of really well-known podcasts, including TechCrunch, for a good few months before the acquisition to up our kind of brand recognition. We worked with an agency that helps get senior execs onto podcasts as a speaker, and so several of our executive team were speaking on podcasts. So our VP of Finance and our Chief Operating Officer Jimmy and a few others were actively pushed to podcasters who would like to speak to them and tell their story. So there's multiple of these methods that we were using, and then part of it also was we just had a series of fantastic announcements. Right, we raised a $200 million Series D at a $1.4 billion valuation, followed by an acquisition. Now we could have announced those two things at the same time, but we split them to get a bump from both of those announcements. And it was really making the most of all of the progression we were making as a company to make them into coverage moments, PR moments.
Love that. So was there anything that you decided to cut when you joined?
It's a really interesting question. Yes, there were several programs that were kind of happening or had been happening in the past, and we just kind of didn't have time to be doing them at the same time as all the new stuff we were taking on. But I'm sure the team would attest that I'm a bit of a more is more person. And so certainly in those first couple of quarters, for me, it was actually about ramping up the amount of things we were doing in parallel and increasing the pace of the amount of things we were doing, rather than being super focused about removing stuff as we added stuff, because I just felt we needed to get way more out of what we were doing to start with,
Mhm.
before we went into it. So probably actually it's this year now that we're thinking a bit more, carefully about where we need to add things and what we need to remove in order to add new things onto the
Yeah.
plate of people. But yeah, that first couple of months was really just about trying to bring loads more energy and enthusiasm and pace into what was already, some great people doing some great work, but it just needed to be done across multiple channels in parallel.
It sounds like a little overwhelming to come in and try to figure out all this stuff. It's like you have a huge marketing budget. You're like, how do I spend this the right way?
I guess, I think those are the fun challenges, right? When there's
Yeah.
no prescriptive single solution, you've got to work it out. So yes, there have been, several points in time where we're scrabbling to work out exactly what things go first and what things go second. But the way I like to do things is to do it with the team. We've got smart people in
Yeah.
every function across this marketing team, and one of my career goals is to be the dumbest person in the room, and I'm definitely that at Paddle. And in my marketing function, I love that we've got specialists on HubSpot. We've got specialists on our PPC. We've got specialists within our BDR managers. We've got specialists on show producing. And my job often is to try and articulate what I think are the kind of top three challenges for the quarter or for the half of the year, and help people understand that this is where the business is going after. And then it's just removing obstacles from people and letting them run at the problem themselves.
Yeah. This is your first time being a CMO, if I'm not wrong?
So I was a founder of a personalization business where kind of I was de facto CMO after kind of leading a whole
Okay.
bunch of things, including sales and other stuff. So that grew to, we're about 60 staff when we exited. So I had a marketing and BDR function there as a co-founder and CMO. But then when we got acquired, I ended up taking on three of the departments of the acquired entity. So then I think I was VP of
Okay.
corporate marketing at Optimizely for a couple of years.
Okay. So it was a quite similar position.
Yeah, there were elements that were similar. I think, for example, product marketing is not something that in a scaled entity I've run before. So that was definitely new. The other elements of marketing, I'd managed myself or built up from the ground up myself. So product marketing was something I put some specific focus into and learning into in terms of reading and understanding the models and frameworks around it. So that was probably where I personally made sure I got a bit closer.
Okay. So last question for you. So it's been almost a year now that you have been CMO at Paddle,
Mhm.
and you've learned a lot. You've gone through a lot. If you could go back in time to January of this year, what lessons would you go and tell your past self?
So I guess I'll split those into things that were related to the acquisition and the things that were just related to the status quo. I think if regarding just Paddle itself, I would probably aggress to spend more time with our sales organization than I did. I've spent quite a lot of time, but I would want to spend more time with our BDR teams and our sales organization. I think secondly, it's only now kind of almost a year in that I'm able to get my head out of being very much in the marketing function and in the business and actually work on it. So help with thinking about future strategy and where we can go, and giving some better definition around kind of some targets, etc. So I would have loved, I don't know how, but I would have loved to have found that time to do that earlier and perhaps prioritize some other things off my plate in order to make sure I got that time. And then related to the acquisition, I think um, you know, acquisitions, they're they rise and fall on the people. Unless you're just buying a bit of tech, they rise and fall on how people integrate, how people feel safe. And when we bought ProfitWell, suddenly there were 85 people in the new Paddle team that had never applied to join Paddle. And so looking back on that, I think we've done a good job broadly across the board, but I think I probably would have moved faster in bringing some teams together and try to be a bit more, my personality is to try and help people come to conclusions themselves and be very facilitative. And I think I probably should have been more directive in a couple of those forums of being like, this is how we're going to do
Okay.
it. Is everyone okay with it? Let's go. Because we might have moved faster and given people more clarity. So those would be two reflections.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Andrew. This has been very enlightening. I always like to get into the inside of of what's happening at companies like this. Petal is a very exciting company. If people want to talk to you more, where should they connect with you?
Yeah, they can meet me at one of the many conferences where we bump into each other, SaaS conferences, otherwise LinkedIn or Twitter. Andrew Davies on LinkedIn at Paddle, or and J Davies on Twitter. Very happy to jump in, answer questions. Anyone who is in that process of growing a SaaS business, I'm super happy to lean in and help.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks for your time. And thanks everybody for listening today. And please do let us know if you enjoyed this episode. Leave a comment and give it a like and share with your friends and family. See you next time.
Thanks so much.
And that's the end of the podcast right there. Hope you enjoyed the episode, but please don't go just yet. If you did enjoy this episode, please leave us a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It'll help other people like you discover us and get the same insights, and it would really help us out a lot. Thank you for being a loyal flying cat and for listening. See you next time.